Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Creative Conversations. This is the corner of Garden of the Imaginal where I have conversations with people who I find really inspiring at the intersection of creativity, mysticism, and meaning making. Today, we have our first repeat guest, Lisa of Middle Sister Tarot, also known as Lisa K. Lisa is an intuitive tarot reader, a channeler and facilitator, and just one of my favorite people to have a conversation with. This bonus episode was inspired by this amazing conversation we were having as friends down at the coffee shop, and it was so enriching. I wanted to open up the space to share it with all of you. We talk about the magician archetype, the Wheel of Fortune, and Lisa shares messages from her guides. And before we get into it, I just want to invite you to a few of my January offerings. The first one is a workshop on January 14th called Exploring Felt Futures through our creative lineage, memories, and sensuous storytelling. And that is with Denise Shante Brown. This is a workshop for anyone who wants to connect their creativity to their sensory being and to create a sense of the future anchored in the body. Again, that's on January 14th. And the second is the largest offering that I have coming up called Time Study. And this is going to be a really expansive exploration about nonlinear time with 4 guest teachers that I am wildly excited about. Angela Basbas Angel, also known as Other Ways of Seeing, Keone Hanale of Pohala Botanicals, Manu River Del Prat, who's going to be talking about timeline jumping and quantum time, and finally, Georgia Jean, who channels the Circle of Light. I will put the links below. Without further ado, I want to invite you to sit back and enjoy this conversation. May it really hold and support you for the coming year of 2026. Welcome back to Creative Conversations. We have a return guest with us, my dear friend Lisa K of Middle Sister Tarot. Lisa, thank you for being here today with us.
Thank you, Xenia. I'm so happy to be here again. What an honor to be a repeat guest.
Yeah, you may be our first, actually. You may be our first. So, Lisa and I saw each other this past weekend, and we were hanging out at one of my favorite coffee shops down the street. And we had this catch up about what we're feeling for 2026 for the year ahead. And I was so inspired by how many parallel things we're feeling. And I also know for you, Lisa, you tapped in and tuned in and channeled a few things about the archetypes of the year from a tarot standpoint, which include the magician and also the Wheel of Fortune. So I wanted to open the door for a bigger conversation that our community could take part in and share what we are both sensing and feeling for what feels to me like a really big shift in tone in 2026. So let's just start with this archetype of the magician. What are you feeling from that archetype or that energy for this year?
Yeah, I'll just preface this by saying I don't feel like I have fully landed in everything that I think about what's happening right now. So I just want to meet you and whoever is listening this with the spirit of, I don't know. This is a wild ride. I was really surprised by how much kind of came through when I lightly tapped in. So I think there's a lot in these archetypes to work with in an especially profound and big way. And the magician is such a powerful archetype to begin with, right? Because it's the one, it's the spark, it's the initiation of really creation. So the magician speaks to what we have been being guided toward, and coming out of the hermit year, where it was a lot of tuning into our inner light, to our inner wisdom, to that quiet, solitary knowing that has to happen when we're drawn down and in.
Mm,
And this year, really feeling this is creation time. And that is the word that came up again and again. And what I was channeling was creation. And so I think the magician is really that element of creation where you have all the resources, you have all the elements, you have the tools at your fingertips, and you know how to use them. And you have enough curiosity to experiment, and you have enough mastery to use them in a way that the magic trick will work, right?
mm.
So that's with the magician in particular. But really, I'll just say what I was guided towards in thinking about the magician was in partnership with the Wheel of Fortune. And this was what was really cool because I had never thought about this before. Was I was shown this image of two angles coming together in the middle towards creation, the magician from one end and the Wheel of Fortune from the other. And what I was guided towards was that these two elements working together is co-creation. When we talk about co-creating with the universe, that's what this is. The Wheel
Wow.
of Fortune being that universal life force energy, the wheel turning and turning, and there are things coming to meet us and you and me that we have no idea what that is yet, but it's on its way to us. And meanwhile, we're at the other end being the magician, creating ourselves, and these two forces moving together, and the actual co-creation of our reality meets in the middle of these two energies.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. That's such a cool visual. And I'm just called to rewind for a second for folks who are listening in case they're not necessarily familiar with why we have a card of the year. It's rooted in the numerology of the year. So this is a year of 2026. So it's 2 plus 0 plus 2 plus 6 equals 10. And in numerology, you will hear some people talk about it more as a 10 year, and some people talk about it more as a 1 year because in numerology, you reduce things down to the simplest number. Yeah, and it's interesting too. I'll read just a little bit from this book, which is kind of one of my go-to resources for tarot when I was first diving into it. It's called 78 Degrees of Wisdom by Rachel Pollack. It's a pretty academic book. It's a lot about the history of the archetypes, the history of the images, the history of the art. But there's a couple sentiments that I want to share just to anchor this conversation a little bit. The magician emerges very directly from the fool in the image of the trickster wizard. Most images of the trump follow Waite's wizard, raising a magic wand to bring into reality the spirit of force, the energy of life in its most creative form. He holds the wand carefully, aware of that psychic power the fool carried so lightly on his shoulder. Thus, the magician, as the beginning of the major arcana proper, represents consciousness, action, and creation. He symbolizes the idea of manifestation that is making something real out of the possibilities in life. Therefore, we see the four emblems of the minor arcana lying on a table in front of him. He not only uses the physical world for his magical operations, the four emblems are all objects used by wizards in their rituals, but he also creates the world in the sense of giving life a meaning and direction. The magician stands surrounded by flowers to remind us that the emotional and creative power we feel in our lives needs to be grounded in physical reality for us to get any value from it. Unless we make something of our potentials, they do not really exist. Look at Waite's picture of the magician. He is not casting spells or conjuring up demons. He simply stands with one hand raised to heaven and the other pointed to the green earth. He is lightning rod. By opening himself up to the spirit, he draws it down into himself. And then that downward hand, like a lightning rod, buried in the ground, runs the energy into the earth, into reality. One of the things that we were talking about in our conversation was about how it feels like a challenge to say yes to our energetic and creative agency, like a challenge or an invitation from the universe at this time to assume that we have those skills that you talked about, that we've mastered them enough to practice, to set intentions, to do the rituals, do the spells, make choices like the magician. And I think that there's a lot of talk about astrologically how we're coming out of a super watery 2025 into this
Mm-hmm.
like fire and air energy of 2026. And I
Yeah,
think that moment from like dreaminess, grief, and then into making decision, it's a wonky transition.
totally. It's wonky and it's uncomfortable and a little bit scary, but
Yeah.
it's undeniable, you know? And I think that's the other thing to me that's been coming through is that whether we feel ready for it or not, or wonky with it or not, we're going to have to do the thing, to be the channel, like the magician, essentially connected above, bringing it down into the material world. We're going to have to do that in some way. And that was the other thing that came through to me was an interesting message. Creation energy. You are the magician. You are the essence of change. From here, you can begin to amplify all the creations you are offering and energizing. The essence of presence is incredibly powerful. So that idea of being of presence is coming up
Mhm.
so much lately. And here's what was really interesting to me. Avoiding anymore, the avoidance will give you a quick release of energy and bring you back to one again, the essence
Mm.
of creation. So if we're skirting around things or avoiding or trying to hide from what we're really feeling called to do, my sense is that there's going to be a very quick cycle of energy is moving in a quicker cycle. And I know you're doing a whole course on time soon, and I think it is very well timed. I think because you know what this to me felt like is that whereas we used to be able to kind of hang out in these cycles of like, I'm not sure, I don't know, like being, we're going to be brought back again and again to the one, the beginning,
Yeah.
quickly this year, which may be really uncomfortable, but
Yeah.
it's
When you say
exciting,
like
you know.
pop back to the one, do you mean if we're in avoiding, we'll just end up in the same place where we're being challenged with the same choice to
Yeah,
create?
I think
Okay.
it, I don't totally know, but my sense is because sometimes I channel this stuff and I wrestle with it, just like anyone hearing it would. But
Yeah.
my sense is that it's just what you said. We're being given a lot of opportunities to step up and act and create in ways that are in alignment with what we know to be true in our hearts, in alignment with our hearts, in alignment with our deeper knowing that maybe we gathered up in that hermit year. And if we're avoiding what we know to be true and how we know we need to act upon that, it's going to be a quicker cycle of being faced with the same pattern or the same challenge again,
Um,
is what it feels like.
Totally, because I think another thing that I've been saying that I've been feeling for me personally, and you know this because I get readings with you, is that I can just feel that I'm personally at the end of a cycle. And the last year was the close of a cycle. And I
Mhm.
feel that I'm being asked to not stay in my comfort zone, even though I feel like I just found my comfort zone. And I can feel that I'm going to do things that I don't feel completely experienced in or don't even necessarily quote know how to do, meaning I'm not
Yeah.
trained in them or I'm not exactly sure how they're supposed to go. And I'm familiar with that to a degree, but it's still like I'm saying yes to something that I don't even know what I'm saying yes to because I just think that if I try to recreate things based on what has already happened in the past, based on patterns of the past or even knowledge of the past, that I feels like there won't be energy in them, like new energy or new
Yeah.
life.
That's so interesting. And I think that's where that idea of presence,
Mm.
and I think this word and this idea of presence is going to be just so crucial this year and beyond just the kind of presence of like mindfulness. It's like really being in the now moment. That is what is going to be the catalyst for the creation of the future. To me, it doesn't feel like we need to act like we're already our future selves. It's like here, now, you already have it. And really being present with that, that it might feel different than you expected it to feel, to be ready to bring something that you don't totally know what it is yet into form. And that's another thing that came through in this rapid little channeling session was that there's a ton of opportunity here and a ton of potential, but there's also not just potential, there's already stuff in existence that just needs calibration or orientation to be brought into form.
It's almost like we've been in this narrative that we're waiting for something to happen, and we're waiting for these circumstances or this new world or this new earth to show us that it's here. But instead of us walking into a 2026, it's not like Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz where everything's suddenly different or in
Yeah.
Technicolor. It's like you can see what is here and what has maybe always been here, and it's like ready to be plucked, and you're ready to know how to pluck it. Like there's been a tiny shift both in you and your environment where you know how to interact with it in a way that is more magical than it used to be.
Yeah, totally. More
It's
magical and more, in a way, natural. Like it's us getting comfortable with what feels, what is the right word? Like aligned and natural for us now.
because you know what this reminds me of when they talk about the Wheel of Fortune, right? There's this concept that in the Wheel of Fortune that there are great mysteries and turnings in life, like the great turning of things changing in our lives that has nothing to do with us. It's not the things that we cause, but the turning of the wheel, a turning of an era. I'll just read this because I think it's useful. This is more from the same book, but more about the divinatory meaning or definition when you pull the Wheel of Fortune in a tarot reading. The Wheel of Fortune signifies some change in the circumstances of a person's life. The person would likely not understand what has caused this change. There might be no direct reason that anyone can see. And in fact, the person is likely not to be responsible in any normal sense of the word. A large corporation buys the company a man works for, and he becomes redundant. A love affair ends, not because the people have made any mistakes in their treatment of each other, but simply because life continues. The wheel turns. The important thing about change is the reaction. Do we accept the new situation and adapt to it? Do we use it as an opportunity and find some meaning and value in it? And then it goes to talk about how the wheel talks about adaptation and in the reverse, resistance to adaptation. But it's reminding me of how in the 10 you have both the 0 and the 1, and what you just shared about things feeling natural. It's almost like we are being resensitized into who we were as small children. Like I think small children are all really magical. Like I feel like all the
Totally.
ones I meet, they feel like when I do this, it's going to make that happen. Of course that's going to happen. Like of course the universe is reacting and responding to me. Of course the things I imagine are possible. And just how you were describing this subtle shift in the naturalness of us remembering our agency, it's almost like a natural response to the resensitization of 2025,
Yeah.
and then coming back into the world and being like, wait a minute, this shit that I was doing before, like I never wanted to do that. That was never natural to me. But I knew for whatever reason, I had to adapt to life as it was, but I don't have to do that this year in quite the same way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. It's like we're readapting back to our core essence. Yeah,
Like the magician is almost like, oh, wait, I have agency and power. And then the Wheel of Fortune is like, circumstances are changing. So the world's not going to be what it was when you were 2 years old or 3 years old and you were like, I'm so magical.
right.
Like there's
Totally.
that convergence. It reminds me of surfing. I'm not a surfer. I'm not even a great swimmer, but it feels like the magician is to be so focused and make a choice. But then the wave or the Wheel of Fortune is like, you just got to be flowing with that or else you're gonna wipe out.
Yeah, you have to be flowing with that or you're going to wipe out. And you have to trust that, again, I think that image of them meeting in the middle, and that's where the true creation happens.
Mm.
It's that making magic, manifesting, bringing things in to creation. And then the circumstances or the wheel turning is going to mold that in some way or spark that or shift that. And then the creation is made in the middle. But you have to move with the energy of the magician in order to get to that creative core. I love that you were talking about it being like coming back to your childlike sense, because one of the themes I wrote down for the year is energy moves back to the creative core. So to me, the creative core is the inner child in a big way. I think we come into this life with our creative core intact, and it gets diffused and blocked and shifted, right? And that's not to say that we, like you said, it's not like Dorothy opening the door and it's Technicolor. Although I do feel like there is like an element of that, but
Totally.
then it's also kind of chaos on top. I don't Sadly, I don't sense that this year is going to be like super easy breezy. I don't think anybody does. We are living in a very real world here,
Mm.
and I think a lot of that kind of chaos is going to continue.
But that's like an interesting thing. This like idea of the Technicolor world being kind of there, but not there, but also the real world being here, because in this sort of pantheon of thinkers that I am inspired by, tuned into through all the internet channels, there is this kind of rainbow spectrum, and there is this group of people. It's mostly kind of Gen Z teachers who I love, who are following this magical Technicolor path where the game is sort of how good can I let it get? Like what the experiment seems to be, how much of the magician can I embody and how much can my reality reflect that? And I think that that is a note in this cosmic song and this human song that's super important. I think there's certain people and voices that are playing that string, that are playing that note. And then I feel like there are a lot of amazing people whose work is incredibly valuable, who are trying to remind us that we are all connected through the understanding of what is going on in the world that we may not be aware of, and inviting us to have compassion and to think about our agency in that way, which is a very different way of using our agency. And I think as we become more multidimensional, how I'm feeling is like learning how to understand that spectrum and that span to use it as your creative toolbox, like how to work with these frequencies and energies and reality to weave together and sew together something that feels really true and honest to your human experience, while also being open to the magical, technicolor, miraculous energy that I think we are really being invited to say yes to. And I think what's really challenging, and I've said this before in tiny groups because I think this could be easily misunderstood, is that I do think we are being invited to understand how to honor and feel the things that create suffering without attaching to suffering as the main plot force in our life, because that is something that even in old mythologies and in movie plots, if you take a screenwriting class, you focus on this pain and this tension and what is missing. It's like part of what human consciousness is taught drives the plot forward.
Yeah.
And I feel like we're being asked to think about how to orient a little bit differently in our narrative of life, not by ignoring suffering or saying it's not happening, but by wondering what other forms of identity and anchoring are available to us as a human species.
Totally. And I absolutely understand your kind of reticence to bring that idea to the table. I love the way you put it of it being a certain note or a string on a multi-stringed instrument. We have to believe and invest in the Technicolor dreamscape. We have to, or we're going to bury ourselves alive with suffering. All of the turmoil and pain and cruelty and greed that is uh, happening, that is on display, that is what we are up against in such
Mhm.
a big way. But I think the idea that we can tend to both and we have to tend to both is really important because I have a very dear close friend from when I was very young, and we're still super close. And we go back to this image of helping each other. You know, if you picture people kind of trying to climb up rocks, where you put your hand back to the next person and you pull them up, and then they put their hand back to you and pull you up. The idea that, if anyone is not free, none of us are free is true. But the question is, okay, so how do we work towards the liberation, the true deep liberation of all sentient beings on this planet? And I think there's real boots on the ground, important ways of doing that with your money, your time, your energy, your empathy, your activism, and also the vision, the holding the frequency of the love and the technicolor and all the things, again, without ignoring the suffering, but with having that be one of the hands that comes down to help pull people out, because otherwise people burn out. You can't just inhabit the suffering yourself from afar while trying to be an activist.
Like, also, I think it's just really important to remember you and I are sitting here in these embodied places as neighbors in Brooklyn who are sharing messages received from cosmic beings and intuitive understandings. You know what I mean? We just have to acknowledge the full spectrum of experience that's available and understand that every time we select one or make a choice, we're not dishonoring or saying the other ones are invalid. And it's a magician year. So it's about choice. So this fear of selection, fear of deselection, it's very much rooted in the perfectionism that's rooted in, I want to say capitalism, but I don't feel like it's the right word because it's just this feeling that human beings are robots and like what our value is in what we produce. Like productivity and creativity are not the same. Like they're just not the same. And I think we mix them up. And I feel like the magician is the year of saying, no, I'm creative, not productive. I'm not a factory. I'm not a computer. Like it's more important than ever to know what it means to be sentient and what it means to be human because of the rise of AI and the rise of tech and all these data and privacy issues that are happening. So the question I feel that's coming up right now is, and I've been really considering this for a long time, is we talk about dehumanization, we talk about human rights, but what about the question, what does it mean to be human? And
Yeah.
maybe the magician and the wheel of fortune are both the convergence of the ways of looking at that question, because there are the things that happen to you.
Right.
And then there's like you as a creator being, and what does it mean to have agency and to be a magical person? And are you willing to find out the extent of that agency through betting on the Technicolor dream and how you can if not bring it to life, at least be a place where that sort of consciousness is coming into the 3D for everyone.
Yeah, for sure. Creativity is love, I think, and I think there are so many layers to the kind of shifts that are happening right now, the structural shifts, the shifts to the human heart, I think, in so many ways. And the shift to the human heart, I think, is happening just as you're saying, through these two sides of like a lot of people opening up to this idea that there's more than what we can see, that there is this kind of these energetics at play, the some of which are the Technicolor dream energies, and what's happening to the human heart by having to witness the suffering and violence and all of the things up close on a 24-hour news cycle all the time, and having a less and less separation between, even if you're a very privileged person, the people in our communities being facing very real suffering and threat. And what does it mean to tune into both of those things and how it's impacting your heart? And then look at the tools on the table in front of you as a magician and decide how you're going to focus your energy. Another thing that came through in this channeled message that is relatable again is just we can help each other. And that I think is another theme that's been growing over the last year in a big way. I think that's one of the kind of warped silver linings of 2025 is the real essence of community care and what it means to help each other and how many different ways that can look and what energies that can draw from, but that everyone has a role to play and everyone has to pluck their string on the instrument or engage in giving what they can and learning how to receive in a balanced way is really important. And that work that we've done already around that is why we're ready to meet this magician Wheel of Fortune year.
Yeah, totally. I love what you said about creativity being love. And I feel like also thinking about how both of the spectrums in the sort of convergence diagram that you were describing of the magician and the wheel of fortune, thinking of them with the heart at the intersection and love and creativity at that intersection, at that point in the middle, makes so much sense when you visualize it. And maybe Lisa, I can ask you for that drawing so I can put it
Oh, sure.
in the notes. Another thing I just remembered you and I talked about the other day was needing to meditate more and needing to come back to the center more and really feeling like we're in training, like Jedi's. Like we need to learn how to hold our energy, how to attune our own frequency, how to really just say yes to the option to manage our energy and tell our energy what to do, because it's part of what we contribute to the collective, to the whole, to everyone we interact with. And it reminds me so much of that visual, the visualized diagram that I keep bringing to mind and that I'll share, because it's like that point in the middle. The meditation or the energetic training or whatever practices you do, I feel like is what helps you get back to that present point or that convergence point where you're not controlling, but you're choosing and you're deciding you're going to be the one to control how that surfboard moves, but you're really, really present with the wave. And yeah, I know we were both talking about how we were both like, oh, we got to meditate like a lot more than we used to. Not get our ass kicked.
Yeah, no, I think that's another big theme coming up, the meditating more. And that's been coming up in my one-on-one readings with people for the last couple of months and the channeling circles that I do and everything, that kind of instruction. I mean, really, I'm often one to be like, well, you don't actually have to meditate. You can do this or do that. But it's pretty much like you need to meditate or you need to figure out a way that feels like that kind of getting into that meditative state. It doesn't have to be sitting like Vipassana silent meditation or anything like that, but getting into that meditative state of just presence and beingness is
Mm.
really important. And I think, like you said, like that one visual of coming to that present center point of creation, of creativity, of love, of all those things with the wheel and the 1 and the 10 meeting is one visual. And then another visual I was given, the energy of 2020 to 2025 was shown to me as an infinity loop, which comes up a lot, but that was a certain size and frequency, 2020 to 2025, and that 2026, the infinity loop gets a lot bigger and the center of it moves up and over. So while we're trying to be present, we are also being brought into this energy that is much a bigger frequency to inhabit, to fill, and the center is up and over. So, which that might sound really weird talking about this on a podcast. I'll send you the image of it as well if it's helpful to, it's kind of helpful to look at. But I think the bottom line to me with that is that the more we can be in those places as kind of like states where we feel tuned in, where we are expanding our energy in whatever ways resonate with us. So I think any kind of spiritual work that people are doing, like meditation, if you're someone who really feels moved by sound frequencies, like sound baths, breath work, like all those things, I think are really, really important right now to find some kind of regularity in letting your system be recalibrated
Mm.
by those things that are already available to us. And there's a million ways you can do that. You can do that in those ways I just listed, or by sitting in presence with your headphones on, listening to a piece of music that you really love. That's something that my guides showed us one time in a channeling circle, that that true presence of listening to anything like can shift a frequency. So I think anything that people can do with some regularity is going to help us find that presence and meet the shift that's happening to
Yeah, I love
wait.
those visuals too because they relate to that convergence visual of the magician and the Wheel of Fortune in a way, don't
Yeah.
they? Like, I'm thinking about how I was doing a lot of work with Deborah Hannekamp in 2019 up until 2023, and she would talk about the infinity symbol all the time. So it's been something very much top of mind for
Mhm.
me. I remember listening to a Lee Harris channel. I don't remember which one it was, but his guides were talking to a therapist who was interviewing them about the crossroads symbol. And they actually mirrored a thought that I'd already had, but it like blew my mind to listen to them. They were explaining how, when we think about being in a place of friction, a lot of times we think about a crossroads. It's like in astrology, one of the tensest angles you can have is the square. It's like this feeling of two things trying to go in a direction where there's just so much tension. But they were talking about how if you zoom out of a tense angle across, it's actually an infinity symbol. If you're able to step back and zoom out and see the big picture, it reminds me a lot of how we interpret these moments of tension or choice from our linear minds is like, are we going to go the right way or the wrong way? Or are we like this polarity or that polarity? And it's like, if you zoom out, if you just allow one and stop resisting it, it's going to take you back to the middle. And it just so clearly in my head as you were talking, I could see that same exact sentiment in these infinity symbols you're talking about with this convergence kind of symbol you were given. This will all be in the show notes so you all can reference it, but it's almost like the human bandwidth of vision versus like the spiritual bandwidth of vision, and how we can use the images almost like these metaphors for how they're both true and they're both happening. It just depends what lens or perspective or how close up we are to an experience in any given day. So thank you for sharing that. And then what you were saying before about the meditation, I'm really one to be like, you don't really have to do this if you don't want to. You can do it this way because I feel like there's so much rigidity and dogma, trauma for all of us around any kind of teaching or any
Totally.
kind of learning or sharing. But this year, I feel like cut it out, Xenia. Like just say what it is. Like
Yeah, it is kind of like cut the crap.
yeah,
It's like cut the crap, like just sit down and, or like whatever, like get to that place. And it's not an escape thing. It's not like we're doing that to escape or to spiritually like be distant from what's happening. It is to help us meet the change and be a part of the positive change and be able to be steady forces of creation and love in this evolution that's happening, you know.
yeah,
But our systems actually need the calibration that happens when we meditate, when we get into those states, which is backed by science. It changes your brain, it changes your DNA, it changes your capacity. And that's what I think really is the thing is that our capacity. You could call it frequency. You could also consider it capacity if that's easier to conceptualize, but it expands our capacity. And
mm,
that is, I think, really important this year. To be present, our capacity has to be expanded. To not dissociate, to not opt out, to not like go up and away. That's not the goal. The goal is to be here and now to deal with the evolution and the changes that need to happen, that are happening, that we need to help co-create
yeah.
to create a gentler, more peaceful, more free, loving world. Our capacity has to expand. And that's
Totally.
how we can do it.
It reminds me of tuning your instrument before you're going out in the world and playing all your songs and playing all your
Totally.
gigs and
Yeah.
playing in bands with other people. Like you want to come with your instrument like totally like mistuned, and it feels like also an interesting time where we're learning, or I'm learning because I have a very cerebral community because I'm very cerebral. But I feel like we are learning that our mental health and energetic health and physical health need to come into coherence and support each other. And our minds have been so pushed to the max for such a long time. And I feel like this moment of stillness you're talking about, or self attunement that you're talking about, is almost like remembering that's not our center. That's not our only location of intelligence or presence. If we can shift it into the heart and just listen, it helps our brain and our mind a little bit to remember it's not alone in this. I think in the spiritual community, we can really diss the mind. And I get it, but it's just another tool or dimension of us. And so I keep thinking about coherence and just being allowed to be all that we are. And I wanted to share this like sentiment with you, and you tell me how you feel. It's kind of inspired by how we started this conversation. I think we need to learn to share without being confident in our rightness or even married to the need to be right, because it's almost like we're being asked to participate in the world with an open heart and contribute in the world with an open heart through the expertise of our innocence plus our honesty and transparency and our truth in a way that just doesn't feel as rehearsed or academic, or even like it relies on expertise the way it did in the past. Yeah.
I love that. The innocence and that was something I think we were talking about, how it just feels like people are showing up with more honesty now. There's less like of a veneer on how people are showing up now in a really positive way, I think, even though it's usually coming as a result of like getting just dragged by the universe, you know? I love that. And I think that's a really beautiful way to think about it. and not needing to be right. Also, showing up with the understanding that you might have something that feels right or true to you, but can you still be curious about what is right and true for someone else? That kind of curiosity is really needed now, too. But I like how you're weaving in the kind of inner child, the innocence and the honesty comes with that, I think, a lot of times because there's nothing really to hide.
One of the big themes for me this coming year was sort of the great unmasking, is what I'm calling it. And it almost reminds me of the intimacy you have in a relationship with someone the first time your feelings get hurt and you don't know if the person meant to hurt your feelings or what it is they meant by it. And you're done playing cool and you just want to say, like, I really care about our friendship. Like this thing you said, it hurt me and I don't know what you meant or what to make of it. And I know that's super specific, but that's just an energetic analogy for I feel like how we're showing up, which is like here's the truth of what I'm experiencing. I'm not married to feeling like this is right, but I am open and I want to connect. I want to understand. I still want to know you in my confusion. And I think with all this Saturn Neptune conjunction happening in the coming year, there is this invitation to meet each other, yeah, with this transparency and open heartedness that may reorganize a lot of how we relate to ourselves and how we relate to each other. And I know that I said that in a way that it's about friendship, but I even could take that as a metaphor for how we share things creatively with other people or
Yeah.
philosophically.
And that maybe we need to say less.
Yeah.
Maybe it's like knowing each, really coming into the resonance of like, how do we experience and know each other, having to explain less
Mm,
about our rightness or how we got to a point or whatever it is, or why
mm,
we feel the way we do or see it the way we see it,
mm.
which, I'm all air and fire almost exclusively, but I think that kind of, not needing to be right is really resonant for this year. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. As we're coming up to the end of our conversation here, I'm just wondering, are there any last messages you wanted to share, any last feelings or sentiments that could be useful to folks who are listening or that have just been intriguing you for the coming year?
I'll just share some of the themes I wrote down. Listening with intention was
Mm,
one, which has been coming up for a while. The frequency shifts is
mm,
another. Creation comes alive,
mm,
which I think that is that 10 in 1 thing. Creation comes alive.
mm.
And calibration to a new connection. The other one's energy moves back to the creative core and we can help each other. So synthesizing all of that together, I think it's extra important to be really kind and gentle to ourselves and to start any sense of like new year or new energy, whether that's now or at the spring equinox or the lunar new year, whatever it is, if you have a point in the year where you feel like starting again, maybe starting with some kind of little reflection on how far you've come and really rooting yourself into all that you have in this present moment, just in yourself and around you, whether you can see it or not. I think that's a really good place to start. And I think we're going to have a lot of opportunity to show up for each other, to take care of each other. And that starts with having the capacity. And
Mm.
so taking time for yourself, taking care of yourself is in service to the whole, especially this year, I think, because we need to have the capacity to help each other.
Yeah, thank you for that. I feel like our community is filled with also very giving, empathic people. And I think it is often that last reminder of needing to take the moment to take care of your vessel, take care of yourself that really hits home, or I feel like I just want to reiterate. So thanks for
Yeah.
bringing that. And yeah, thank you for sharing everything, Lisa. We will share how you can find Lisa's newsletter and Instagram and book readings when her books are open, or join her channeling circles in the show notes. Is there any other thing that you want to share that you have coming up, Lisa?
Just my monthly channeling circles. That's probably the best way to kind of just get a sense of working with me. Some more to come, but right now that's it. And thank you so much, Xenia.
Thank you so much for tuning in with me. I hope that you found this useful. I also want to just remind you that the music you are listening to is by Kristen Sontag of Sunday Diamond. I will link her album Incantations below. Highly recommend you check it out. It's so beautiful. And I hope to see some of you at our upcoming workshop, Exploring Felt Futures through our creative lineages, memories, and sensuous storytelling, or the beautiful expansive container that begins at the end of January, Time Study. See you next time, gardeners.